Oh. Call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First item this evening is the minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, September 11th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Osmondson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries unanimously.
Item 2 is the first item from this evening's public hearing. It pertains to proposed zoning amendment bylaw number 4741, and it's a text amendment to revise the recreational and commercial vehicle parking regulations in residential zones. Staff recommendation is that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to see if Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4741.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Marsden. Councillor Zerillo?
So I have to say I actually like some of the things in this bylaw, some of the things that we're addressing, and I think it was mentioned that this bylaw is over 40 years old. So I have to say I do like a number of things in this bylaw. The problem is enforcement. I just look at this ability to enforce the things that we're talking about here, and we can't even necessarily proactively enforce the current bylaw, and I don't see this one making it any easier. So I want to ask again through the chair to city staff, is there a possibility to do some type of a trial period to see if we see change in residential neighborhoods and if we get a significant increase in complaints? Because I just wouldn't want to see us open up a bunch of complaints and it cost us a lot more money and resources for bylaw officers to have to be out there. So is there an opportunity to do a trial period to see how this pans out?
Anybody want to answer that? Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I know this question was raised earlier as well, and I think the way I characterize it then is if the bylaw, the proposed amendment bylaw is supported by council, it goes on the books, those are the regulations. There's not like a time clock on that it would fall away or come back. However, if all of council, if the direction is we'd like to see a report back in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, how's this all working out? I imagine that'd be possible. It's in another department, and maybe they can speak legal services or bylaw enforcement as to what that would mean for them. But it would take that sort of action of council as direction to monitor and report back.
All right, so thank you. So I would then just like to make a motion on that or some kind of amendment to just ask that if this goes through tonight, that staff report back at 6 months and at a year to see if the complaints have gone up. That would be that. So how would I do that, Madam Chair? Would it be a motion or would it just be metrics follow-up, or what would that be?
Mr. Dumont, you had something?
Thank you, through the chair. What I was going to suggest was we do an annual bylaw enforcement report to council where we summarize different enforcement aspects by category. This is one particular one that we could track and incorporate into that report. We do keep stats on the complaints related to RVs, so we could wrap that into our annual report out if that's okay with council rather than doing a separate report.
That would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are you done, Councillor Zerillo?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Councillor Asmussen?
Well, thank you very much. I think the updated report's done a good job in most of the report. Like I said in the public hearing, the one part that I want council staff to track, other than the complaints, is about the fact of the reduced parking by blocking off garages. As I said, I like the parking on the sides. I think that's fine. The one house that came up, the one gentleman spoke and parked, he designed his house, and I think I agree with him that whether that motorhome is there or not, there's going to be a blockage anyways. So I'm just concerned, but I wanted to have staff. I'll move this through this amendment. I do think there's a lot of good things here that updated the bylaw and cleaned up some things that need to be done. My one concern, I want staff, because we heard tonight about parking on streets being plugged up with parking. It's just not people not using the garages, but this also adds another fact of blocking up driveways and not having people the ability and putting too many cars in the streets. So I'll move this through. I'm going to support this going through, but I want to be able to see what effect that it may have on parking in neighborhoods and how much of an effect it will be. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge?
You know, for the most part, I think there's some good improvements here, and that's really what this is about, is making our communities and our neighborhoods more livable. I do have one concern, and that is the parking in the front yards. I think that if a house is designed with parking at the side of the house and somebody wants to pull their RV up to the side of the house or even park it in their backyard, I'm fine with that. But that figure we looked at, where that picture number 2, where you can put the car perpendicular or horizontal, in parallel with the roadway and basically block off the front of the house, and then have a longer one if you want, as long as you don't have a secondary suite, or the fact that you can even park it, pave your front yard and park it diagonally. Those are the ones that concern me. And I think, the weight of the vehicles, I'm fine with the new weight. I mean, the new, pickup trucks and things are heavier now. That makes sense. There's now restrictions on the height. That's an improvement. Screening, if it's at the side, I think that makes sense. But I'm really struggling with this length of vehicle in the driveway for two reasons. One is you can pave a new parking pad and put it in the front lawn. And two, it relies on people knowing where their property line is, because a lot of people think that their driveway goes all the way to the curb. And so therefore they think they can put a larger vehicle in there, and when in fact there's an invisible line where their driveway technically ends. And we're relying on people to know where that invisible line is. And I'm concerned that people will go out and buy motorhomes thinking, well, it fits in my driveway, therefore it fits. And that's what really has me concerned. So I'm fine with everything, but this length thing, I think that's where we're going to get the pushback. And at the moment, I'm inclined to sort of ask for separation, because I don't know I'm going to separate or support that particular bullet. But I'm open to hearing what my colleagues have to say to see if you can convince me otherwise on that one.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you. There's some parts of this I really like, and there's some parts, like Councillor Hodge, that I'm a little nervous about. Someone asked about property values and RVs, and no, RVs sitting in a nice neighborhood right in front of your garage, in front of your home, aren't a pretty sight. And especially for the people that have to move in and they're next door to it. I think the idea of having lots that people can park the RVs down the side are much nicer. And I have issues if this bylaw allows people to pave their front lawns and park it willy-nilly wherever they want, provided it can fit in the space. That's not an improvement to me. So we're going to monitor this for 6 months and take a look at it, and have some of the RV folks. Ask them. Let's ask them how it's working, what they see. Is this an improvement? Definitely the weight and all that stuff that I think Councillor Marsden had brought up before, bringing us into this century with this bylaw is probably a good thing. So I will pass it, but I'm very skeptical about what we might end up with. Thank you.
Councillor Marsden?
Thank you. I want to thank staff for all the work they've done on this, because I think they've come out with a good and balanced approach. I think what we have to recognize here is that living in the city of Coquitlam, our homeowners have spent a significant amount of money to buy their homes, and they have pride of ownership, and they're not going to be willy-nilly doing things to their front yard that's going to detract from that. Again, you take a look around. I think people do take pride in their neighborhoods. They take pride in what they've got. And when it comes to their ownership of their RVs, they want to make sure that they've got them safe, they've got them secure, and they've got them within sight. They want the convenience of being able to load them and unload them when they do take their family vacations. So I think what staff have come up with here is a good and balanced approach. Again, I want to thank you for that. I support it completely, recognizing that the vast majority of travel trailers you're going to find are going to be under that 25-foot mark in most situations. And as we see more and more subdivision of lots here in Coquitlam and smaller lot sizes, the number available to do the larger RVs is going to diminish dramatically. So for fear that, gee, something's going to happen, that we're going to have these RVs parked all over and sprawled all over front yards, I really do not see that happening. We're going to see basically what we have now in many, many cases. But in some cases, we're going to open the door in terms of saying this is exactly what can be here. So those folks that do have the larger lots can comfortably secure their RV on their site. So it makes good sense to me. A number of the other fixes to this, the fact that it's got to be, the RV has to be owned by the occupant of the house or the owner of the house, that makes great sense. We don't want to see a bunch of RVs parked in yards and rented out as secondary and tertiary units where suddenly you've got a house with a suite and the RV. We don't want to see that, and I think the provisions in the bylaw make that clear that we're going in the right direction. So I support this fully, and again, I want to thank staff for some great work on it. Appreciate it.
Councillor O'Neill?
Thank you very much, and I'm going to echo what Councillor Marsden said, and so echo. Well done. A question. In the public hearing document, item 1, and I think it was presented on the screen as well when the planner presented the bylaw, there was 8 or 9 bullet points about everything that this bylaw does. None of those bullet points said that this bylaw newly allows RVs to be stored on front yards. Although that's the impression I think that Councillor Hodge got, that the picture shows that. Were RVs allowed to be stored on the front yards under the old bylaw, under existing law? Are they allowed currently? What's existing information in law, in bylaw? It's not new really. Not brand new outside information. Well, let the clerk talk.
Council's permitted to make inquiries about the nature of the bylaw before them.
Yeah. So does this bylaw newly add the allowance of parking in the front yard?
Okay.
Through the chair to Councillor O'Neill. No, this bylaw doesn't make any changes to the allowance of parking an RV in the front yard.
Right, that's what I thought. And so I think that a graphic that was put up there led to the impression that this is a new thing in the bylaw, and therefore the bylaw has some flaws in it. But I didn't see that in the bylaw, and thank you for explaining that. So that's something I just wanted to clear up, get on the record, and I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
And I just want to take a minute to also thank staff for your work on this, and say that I am happy to support this. I think it's well thought out, it's balanced, and recognizing that the spirit of this bylaw was created back in the day based on the setbacks, and times have changed, and RVs are bigger now, and there's more and more people who utilize RVs for their family vacations. Cost of living is high, and we live in a beautiful province, and going out with your family in an RV is one way to get some really good quality travel in. So I support accommodating families that have RVs. And that one speaker we heard from who talked about the light, I think that if the house was closer, it would be less light than an RV. So I think that houses built with the pads to accommodate the RV are much more attractive than the front ones, which some people have expressed concern here. However, I think it's all context dependent, and I support this. I think it's thought out, so thank you. Oh, sorry. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Yeah, I'm not used to this. All in favor? Yep.
Other than ask for separation, the only motion that is before council is to give second, third, and fourth and final readings. I think what Councillor Zerillo is asking and what Councillor Hodge alluded to was separation of some of the individual items found within those bylaws. So what I would say is that those be brought up on the screen, which we can do, and that those be proposed as amendments to the bylaw that is before you. I guess I would. So what we'll do is we'll put, I believe you're looking at we'll put that up on the screen there too. So I believe Councillor Zerillo is looking at the text that was found in the item itself, in the agenda that was prepared for the item, sorry. And the bullet that is there is congruent with one of the recommendations that was in the staff presentation, but is worded slightly differently. So.
I mean, I can get into a whole discussion about this, about current driveways or parking pads or ones that can be poured, because I think all the council knows that I have an experience on my street where someone poured a driveway with no letdown. It's not actually a driveway. They use a piece of 2x4 to get their RV on and off of the grass. But so I've got some different issues with this one. So I'd like to vote on this one separately, if we could please. We just pull this one out.
So I would look to staff to say if this was pulled out, would an alternative have to be put in, make the bylaw function?
Yeah, just separation. Yeah, just separation.
Mm-hmm.
The proposal would be to remove this wording, and I look to Mr. MacIntyre.
Yeah.
Mr. MacIntyre?
Yes, thank you for your patience. We're just conferring here. No, we believe that if that's supported by council, that can go ahead. It won't undermine the other proposed amendments. But really what it does do, though, it overturns, I think, what's been one of the real crucial issues to this, and one of the main concerns from the start, and that was the reason it was addressed and recommended. But it can be pulled out, and the rest can go forward on its own.
Councillor Zul, did you just mean for it to be pulled out for separate voting?
Yeah, I don't, yeah,
Not pulled out, right?
I can sense from the table that everyone's okay with it. I'm not, and I don't want to say I have to refuse the whole thing. I just want to be able to say I don't agree with that one piece.
The proposed amendment would be that that section be removed from the bylaw before you for consideration.
Okay, so if I don't agree with that one piece, I have to vote against the entire.
Ultimately, the bylaw needs to receive readings. So at some point, the bylaw text that is before council, amended or otherwise, would need to be voted on in terms of its readings. You're asking to change a portion of the content.
Okay, so I have to make a motion to amend, and then I need it seconded?
You're proposing that this item be removed from the bylaw text that is before you. So I would recommend.
Do I need to make a motion and have it seconded? Okay. So I move that we remove bullet number 4 under black bullet number 3, permit recreational and commercial vehicles longer than the existing 7.6 meters, so on and so forth. I would move that to the floor, that we take that out, based on the fact that there's a lot more situations involved in it in regards to pouring driveways, having driveways where the driveways can be.
Okay. So that motion's on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Oh, no?
No, we got to discuss it first.
Okay.
Okay, so
We're talking about the amendment.
yes, the amendment. The amendment is to remove this from the bylaw, but we cannot make changing to this wording or change the intent, because that would cause us to then have to go back for a new reading, and that would change it, so then we'd have to go back for another public hearing. Would that be correct? If we wanted to make substantial changes to this, that would require a new public hearing, wouldn't it, or would it?
And I'd have to look to my colleague in planning to see the degree of nature of that change, which is my question earlier about whether it was fatal to the bylaw. The obvious point is that some people could believe that they supported this and that this was before council, and it's not a that they were in favor of that as is and didn't get a chance to speak to it on that
Right.
Basis. At the same time, it is a change that was out there and part of the bylaw, and people could have come forward to speak to it if they
Yeah.
wish.
Yeah,
It's the degree of change that I'm a little uncertain of, not being the subject matter expert, and that's why I would look to my colleagues in planning to perhaps answer that question more fully about the degree to which it's impactful upon the bylaw.
Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think maybe to refer to the summary of proposed changes in the public hearing brief, and we try to set out on the table what the current bylaw says, what's proposed, and what the change is. So in this one here, if that is taken out, basically we're going back to what the current restriction is. So it's, you're not adding restriction, you're going back to what is current now. So in my view, that can go ahead if there's the support of council to remove that from the amending bylaw.
so it could go ahead if we remove it, but if we were to alter it, that would change the intent. If seeking clarification, for example, I think parking at the side, I don't worry about the length if it's parked at the side of the house. I do worry about the length if they start parking it diagonally other places. But to add clarification of, such things as it can be there providing it's in the driveway, it can't exceed the length of the driveway, I'd be happy if it says providing it's in the driveway, not parked diagonally or something else. But that changes the intent, and so in which case I find myself, I don't want to pull this from the bylaw because I think that's a bigger change in the overall bylaw, but I don't know that I can make a wording change here. So I find myself probably having to just support it the way it is, and if we have those issues come forward later, then we have to make amendments to the bylaw down the road. I'm just sort of figuring out how to do this and still keep all the good work that's been done here.
Madam Chair, no, really good comments there. Get it. In your, through to Councillor Hodge, he's correct. If we start tinkering around with that, adding additional restriction, we're probably now, amending the scope and spirit. What I would say, though, is this has come up before, and I dare say it, the whole parking issue, and it's something I think we're looking at, and we can monitor that. So we'll leave that for another day.
I'm trying to be also consistent with my votes on previous discussions on parking on front lawns. So anyway, okay, I'm fine with where we are. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Oh, Councillor Wilson? Okay. Councillor O'Neill?
Thank you. So none of the documents I have in front of me tonight actually, unless I'm missing something, actually don't show full wording of a bylaw, right? These are summaries. Like what we're looking at here are bullet points. And if we vote on this bullet point, yay or nay, and that's, we're actually impacting the precise wording of a bylaw in a certain way that And where would that bylaw, that proposed precise wording of that bylaw be? It's not a bylaw there.
No, but you know, like the official. No, but-
Madam Chair,
Mr. Member?
yeah, I'm not sure what the confusion. I've got a copy of the bylaw in front of me here. This is bylaw number 4741, and in that it amends the city's zoning bylaw, and there's a series of sections that do that. And one of those sections is 2.1.3, and it gets to amendments of Section 508 General Regulations. And the city clerk will put that up there.
Yeah,
And there's actually a subsection in there that gets to the specifics around the RV and trailer length.
So do we have that? Do we have this somewhere in our packages? We don't have that. So, yeah, so in voting on this bullet that it's now been moved and seconded as amendment, we are actually voting on this on F2, FII, those ones right there. Okay. That's what we're actually going to be voting on stuff there. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to know that and wanted to be... I don't have a problem with this, by the way, and I plan to vote against the amendment, but I wanted to know exactly where this fit in. And do we need some moments to read this here? Just a minute.
It's, I believe, through the chair, it's subsection E above the recreational vehicle. I think the pen points to the commercial vehicle.
Okay, move that pen. Oops, turn that light back on. So this is the wording of the bylaw, the proposed new bylaw. Okay. So we're going to have to rewrite several sections here, obviously, then. And then we wouldn't really be, I would suggest, the recommendation is to give second, third, and fourth readings, right? Would you want to just end it at third reading and have the new wording of the bylaw come back at fourth, even though I moved second, third, and fourth reading, but would we be able to do that since we actually don't know what the final wording of the bylaw would be?
It's a good question, and one I just actually walked up and asked Mr. MacIntyre myself. Generally, staff are reluctant to give final reading to bylaw text as it's amended on the floor. However, in looking at that particular section, while it would require some renumbering, my discussions with Mr. MacIntyre concluded that section can just be pulled out as is, and as Mr. Keating said earlier, it would just revert us back to the existing state.
Okay, so we can give fourth and final reading to this. Okay, good. Those are points of clarity that I needed just for security reasons. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're voting on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we have Councillor Hodge, O'Neill, Towner, Asmussen, Marsden, and Wilson opposed. So it doesn't carry.
So moving back to the original motion, I'll just bring it back up. It has been moved and seconded that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zone Amendment Bylaw number 4741.
All in favor? Opposed? That's Councillor Zarrillo opposed, and that carries.
Prior to moving on to the next item, I would invite Councillor Marsden to speak.
As stated earlier in the public hearing. Thanks.
Okay.
Next item, item 3, was the second item from this evening's public hearing. It pertains to zoning amendment bylaw number 4785. The properties at 804 and 810 MacIntosh Street and 811 Kelvin Street. Staff recommendations that council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4785.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Wilson. I've got a speaker list started. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I want to thank all the residents in the area that came out tonight for this particular item. I know it's a very, very difficult thing to have, to feel like you're having something imposed on your neighborhood. And we honestly don't take this lightly, so please understand. We're there with you. I just wanted to answer a few of the concerns that were brought up. In no particular order, but there was some concern about the lane. I believe the proposal talked about bollards at the end of the lane so that it wouldn't be a through lane. There was talk about the removal of trees. And this is a very, very difficult one for the city because we're all concerned about trees, but almost everybody's house that we currently live in now had trees to build them originally, and unfortunately it's just something that necessarily has to be done when you're redeveloping an area. Lots of talk about traffic in a couple of the items, but especially this one. And again, we hear you. There's very little sometimes that we can do about traffic. And I think, as I mentioned about the other item, I think in the Metro Vancouver area, we're just going to have to, unfortunately, get used to a bit more traffic. We had concerns about property values. Our experience is when property gets redeveloped, the property values in the general area go up rather than going down. And I believe that would be the case again in this area. So I don't believe that this hurts the property values. I think if anything, it improves the property values. We had somebody talk about how it's the wrong place because it wasn't on a transit corridor. Our understanding is that Como Lake has pretty good transit service, especially to get to the Coquitlam station. And we're trying to increase density along transit corridors. A lot of concern about cars parked at the corner of MacIntosh and Como Lake, and I hope our bylaws department heard that loud and clear, and will be checking into that a little bit more often because you're not allowed to park on a corner, and if that's the case, if anybody sees a car parked on the corner, please call our bylaws officer. And then some concern about affordable housing, and we dealt with that again in the other item. Definitely, these houses will not be considered your typical affordable housing. But as a city, we're trying to provide a whole spectrum of housing for our community, and houses on smaller lots generally are less expensive than houses on larger lots, and so these will be slightly more affordable than most of the houses on MacIntosh and Kelvin now. So you don't have to agree with me on all of these, but from being on council for 4 years and others being on council much longer than myself, we've heard a lot of these arguments, and they're very, very difficult arguments. We don't take them lightly. We're trying our best to balance the needs of local residents with what's best for our community as a whole, which is what we were elected to do. And again, we really appreciate you coming out, expressing your views, because that's what makes these decisions the best decisions that we can have. So thank you very much.
Councillor O'Neill?
Yeah, and thank you very much, and thank you for all the presentations today as well. And Councillor Wilson, just like Councillor Marsden before in the last event, last item, said a lot of things that I was planning to say. I think I heard most loudly tonight was a big splash of a warning shot across our bow about that lot that's not being developed, the one that faces onto Como Lake Avenue. That was the message to me that really that sunk in more than, I guess, this warning shot across the bow must have hit if it sunk in. More than, it seemed to resonate more because I think a lot of the arguments I heard tonight were arguments against that I probably could have heard if the proponent had come to us with the very first development proposal that I never saw, that I hear about now with 30 homes on these sites or something like that. Well, actually, I did see it once, a couple of years ago, as a matter of fact. So I don't want to mislead people about that. But I think we would have heard the same arguments about that, and that would have been, to me, making a lot more sense, especially when it comes to what we heard so much about tonight was traffic. And I re-looked, and I said, how can there be so much concern about extra traffic when you're essentially adding 2 extra houses? Instead of 1 big house, you can have 3 medium-sized houses. So it's 2 extra houses on each of the streets. The potential problem with parking leading to some sort of bottleneck at the intersection of MacIntosh and Como Lake is another issue. And as Councillor Wilson said, I think it's something that should be looked at and make sure that those are good, clear intersections. But I really can't see a lot of extra traffic because of 2 extra homes. I did drive down the street over the weekend as well, and it's a neighborhood that is in transition, and it's transitioning in a way that I don't think is the healthiest way for the city. And that's the modest homes are being replaced by very, very large homes. And I don't think in this day and age that that's necessarily the best land use. Certainly the owners of those lots have every right to do that. So the neighborhood is in transition. We heard from people who were complaining about some of the problems associated with that, but we didn't hear that there had been actually formal complaints made to City Hall. And I do urge people, if you know there's a large home there with 2 or 3 suites in it, you know that the second and third of those suites are illegal. They should not be there. Please report them to our bylaw people. We won't stand for that, but you have to report them. We try to catch them when they're being developed at the construction phase. If we see some plans that would look like there's going to be some extra suites in there, we step in. But if they're added after the fact, we only respond to complaints, so please respond to that. So the neighborhood is in transition. We can't put a glass jar over this community and say, we don't want any more change. We have committed to some densification, and I believe what's before us today, and specifically what's before us, is the most gentle of the densifications that we can imagine. If you sat through the rest of the public hearing after this item, you saw some discussion about some lots on Burke Mountain that are quite a bit smaller than these ones. These are actually very generous sized lots compared to most of the lots that are going up on Burke Mountain. They're not as big as the very big lots that are currently on this street, but they will still be good sized lots. Those houses won't look like they're, I don't think the houses will look like they're jammed in, like row homes or anything like that at all. I think they're going to be attractive homes. And so I can't see how they're going to be such a detriment to the community. So I did move this, and I will be voting in favor of passage of the bylaws. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Well, I had mentioned at first reading and moving it to public hearing that I'm always for compromise. And I was hoping that the developer, because he didn't intend on sort of completing his whole plan, which was mentioned many times tonight, by not working on the Como Lake piece what you've been calling a remnant. I think there's a lot of mistrust in that community, and I was hoping that I could support it if it had come to this public hearing with some of the compromises and modifications suggested by staff. And here are my issues. Parking. These are all going to have a suite, so there's 3 parking spots required. I believe that 5,500 square feet is a lot of density to put on this house. I don't frankly know how you're going to make it fit into a community like that, which all have large expanses, but you could have a nice expanse on the front of the house or the back of the house, but when you have to have 3 parking spots and you've got 2 46-foot lots and a 49-foot lot and a 5,500 square foot building, it just doesn't compute to me. We want smaller homes for smaller families, but these lots are going to be built out to their max, and I think we need to compromise on that. It is a high traffic area. I know that area very well. And I see where some of the parents are coming from with people roaring up and down. I mean, I think we all know what Baker Drive, we have, a place there and a school there, and the parents just roar up and down. But the parking and the suites, as Councillor O'Neill have just said, really concern me. So if I have my way, you'll be seeing a lot of bylaw enforcement trucks hopping around that neighborhood over the next week or so. Some people have to have suites because they need to have them to support the high cost of housing. So I always call it the needy and then the greedy who just try and put in everything they can, 3 suites and 6 mother-in-law suites and whatever else they can put into that little parcel. That makes them very greedy, and it makes not for a good neighborhood and not for good neighbors. My concern by not supporting it is that the developer would just go and build a couple of monster houses, which I think are an embarrassment, so I really don't want to see any of those anymore in my house. When new neighbors move into existing neighborhoods, they like to fit in. And when you work with people and you're marketing homes and you take them to their new home and they're all excited, the last thing they want to do is move into a neighborhood that everybody's ticked off because they've got one of these smaller homes. But the market that we're in right now in Coquitlam is a lot of downsizing going on. A lot of the older folks my age are looking to sell their homes and getting a big dollar for them and moving on to some other form of housing, usually apartments or townhomes, or moving somewhere warm and sunny. What that does, I can't always have people running around saying developers are greedy, because when you have to pay 2.5 or 3 for a giant lot that you can subdivide, you still have to get your money back, and I get that. But I think there could have been some compromises here that would have made for better neighbors. It would have felt better, and frankly, I think would have looked better. The other thing I would have wanted, if I were going to support this, was the little walkway that's there. I would want it sort of written in stone now, before you develop the one on Como Lake. And to put it all in a nutshell, I think this is premature. We are really busy on the Coquitlam Lougheed plan. We are not here yet. We have staff working on corridors. I think it will come, but we're just not quite there yet. And so people are sort of getting shell-shocked when they see this bouncing into their neighborhood, and they're not ready for it. So as it sits, I would have preferred to send it back to staff to see if we can't get some wiggle room and some good neighborliness going and some compromises and something that would fit in more. I see that 2 of my colleagues are fine with it the way it is. So I will not be voting in favor of this. And I'm sorry to say that because I think we have a good developer here, and I just think we went at this too soon and we went about it in the wrong way. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, thank you. You know, when often when I get asked for people, they sort of say, "Well, you know, how do you like being on council?" I said, "You know, some nights are tough, and you know, this is one of those tough decision nights." But I said, the biggest challenge that, you know, they'll ask me, "What's the biggest challenge?" I said, the biggest challenge is that you're trying to plan an entire community, and you're trying to plan for 50 years, because anything that gets built here is going to stand for 50 years. So you try to build a community for the future, and you try to make decisions that you think are best for the whole community. But then you have to recognize that people live in these neighborhoods. And in some cases, there's people who've made investments and lived there for 40 years. And it's not uncommon to run into somebody who says, "I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. I've raised my kids in this neighborhood." And that's very hard when suddenly that neighborhood starts to change. And if everybody was on the same time frame where they said, "Okay, in 4 years we're all moving out and the whole neighborhood could change," that would be easier. But everybody has their own time frame. And some people want to sell today, get the best value they can for their investment, and move off to sunnier areas or downsize. And when they do that, it leaves decisions that have to be made and impact on their former neighbors. So that's what I find really, really tough here, because a lot of people came out tonight very passionate about their community, and it's a new community association has sprung up, and I hope that this is a community that's going to come together and celebrate some of the many great things that we do in this community, in this city. Tonight we heard talk about precedent. And I think we have to be very clear that each decision is made on its own merits. That this isn't like a court of law where, well, if somebody votes this way, it becomes the law and that everything will follow. That's not the case. Each development and each proposal will be weighed on its own merits. So this is a change that's being proposed, and it may start other change. But if it wasn't this lot, two people down the road could put their lot together and do a three-way split. We're seeing that happening in other areas. So I think change is coming to this neighborhood. We're seeing change there now. In some cases, it's very large homes. Personally, I don't like the look of the large homes. I would rather us see, putting two smaller homes there, and we've heard that from people. And the people who don't like the monster homes say, I'd rather have two homes instead of one big one. So that's one of the things that happens. It's, everybody has a different view of what's, changing the neighborhood. So I think that's one of the things that we heard tonight. In fact, one resident mentioned that there's a monster house there with multiple suites. And I think it was Councillor, somebody earlier said that that's the possibility of what would happen. If this didn't go through, the developer could put 4 large homes there, and somebody could move into those homes and put in extra suites. So really, when we look at this as a development, we're talking 6 houses versus 4 houses. And it is a change in this neighborhood, but the overall impact of 6 versus 4 is a change. But I think that many of the concerns that residents had would occur with 4 houses. And I think we have to look at how do we mitigate the impact of parking issues, the safety of that road. And I'd certainly, I agree with Councillor Rea. I think we got to get bylaws up there if people aren't parking properly, and that there's issues with people coming and going from that into that street. That's a very tough intersection now. And I think we have to make sure that intersection remains safe, even if more homes go through there. There was concern about the future of the lane. I spent many years as a private citizen on the traffic calming committee, and I absolutely see a problem the day that lane goes through there. It is going to be a rat run, and when that decision day comes, I'll be speaking up about what measures we can take to do that. So it could be bollards, it could be, if it's a lane, there's things that we can do on lanes. So a resident did speak about that, and that's a decision for when the time comes, but something that I will certainly support at that time. I think we've heard some concerns about the remnant lot that's left. I think a lot of what we heard tonight was really a concern about that lot. There was an original proposal. I took the time to go up to the school to view it, just to see what was being proposed. This proposal before us is very different. Now, I don't know what things, staff or somebody may have wanted to change, but it is certainly a lot different than what was originally proposed, partly because there's a large piece of property that's not being developed right now. But 300 people signed a petition against that proposal. And I couldn't help but get the feeling that many of the people who came out tonight are still skeptical about what is going to happen in that neighborhood. And as we've said earlier, what's going to happen on that piece of property. And I think as Nora said earlier, that is a subject for future discussion. And, whatever's proposed there will be an opportunity for residents to come out and voice their opinions there. And my vote tonight should not be taken as an indication of how I will vote on the next proposal, because it will probably be a very different proposal. And I think Councillor O'Neill sort of summed it up when he said, these are smaller lots than what's in that neighborhood. But when you look at what's happening to lots today in Coquitlam and even on Burke Mountain, these lots are 50% bigger than many of the lots that are being built in our brand new neighborhoods. I do agree with Councillor Reid. I think it would be nice to try to find a way to limit the size. There's this, no matter how big the lot is, there's this tendency to build right to the maximum envelope, and I think that's something that we have to look at in these cases. Is just the size and the amount of structure that's going into the neighborhoods, whether it's a big house on a big lot or two really to the max houses on smaller lots. I think that's something that we have to look at. So anyway, I'm going to support it, because I think that as a proposal, it's 6 homes on relatively large lots, and I think that we'll have to sort of take the next step when that comes.
Mr. Asmussen. Excuse me.
Thank you very much. It was a very well-attended public hearing tonight, and I think the development is not that great of a density increase to the neighborhood. But tonight, I had at least 20 speakers, and all the speakers spoke against it, and some people who didn't come tonight. And so, to me, we had a public hearing, we brought the public out. The public was clearly not in favor of this. I would think to vote in favor of it tonight would be a disservice to what a public hearing is. I think there's a problem here, and I thought we'll go through to the staff. The original proposal talked about townhousing. I think townhousing is probably one of the best land use forms we have. I don't think people understand it 100%. I think with townhousing, when you talk about parking, where we now have 66% have to have 2 parking stalls, 33 tandem, you have to have visitor parking on site, plus there's maybe street parking outside of it. So I think if we go back, when this original plan came forward about townhousing, somewhere along the line, and this has happened in different applications about townhousing, the public's not understanding how efficient townhousing development is in the neighborhood. It's not really cheap housing. Most townhousing in this area would be probably $800,000 to $950,000 for a unit, but that's more affordable than 1.5, 2.5 million. But this community came out tonight pretty solidly not wanting this neighborhood. Do I fully agree with all their points? No, I don't. But once again, that community came out, and I think we need to do a better job on how we explain the changes that are happening, what's needed to happen in this area. I mean, you're correct. We're going to have, potentially, you could have 4 monster houses there. But the other part of the process, and I spoke at the public hearing prior to first reading for the public hearing, saying there was a few amendments here that the staff has suggested that didn't get done. And I understand the frustration is probably the developer. But the community has pushed back against this proposal in quite a strong way. So do I think it's a big going to be a big change? No. I think the people in the neighborhood there, with the parking on Kelvin Street and the problems with it is due to people not using their garages at presently. The neighborhood should really get together and talk about decluttering their garages and putting their cars in the garage, and you'd probably have more parking and traffic problems existing there without any development changing. But you will get 4 large monster houses, probably between 6,000 and 7,000 square feet on those properties without having really to go through a subdivision proposal. It'll just show up and it'll get developed because that's what is allowed and doesn't need a rezoning for. So I wish there would have been more positive feedback on this. I thank the developer for the amount of time he put into this and work on it. But I think the public spoke kind of loudly tonight about their project. Thank you.
Councilor Zerillo?
Thank you. Well, this is probably the hardest one I've seen come by. I'm still not sure what I want to do on this, but I did want to make some comments. And first of all, I did hear loud and clear from the residents, as Councillor Asmundson said. We did not hear anybody, I don't think, speak in favor in the neighborhood there. So I do want the neighborhood to know that I heard them loud and clear. One thing I did want to talk about, though, is the idea that there was maybe limited compromise or perhaps not compromise from the developer on this side. And I think that it's been alluded to tonight that initially there was a thought that this could be a townhouse development. And I think it's come to the counter many, many times. It's gone to the community. I think I heard tonight 3 different times that there was an open house to the community. And I do think that what has come before us is a compromise. And I actually think that from some of the peripheral stuff that I've heard is that there's some confusion on resident side, but there's also some confusion on the developer side, and there's certainly some confusion on my side as a city councillor of what really transpired and what conversations happened. And I actually want to thank the proponent for coming forward with the courage to, put this forward, because I think there is some, there is definitely consensus across this council that we want densification, but to Councillor Reid's point, the timing has to be right. And I think for a developer to navigate that externally without being able to speak to council and trying to do it through the community, but knowing that this is potentially the right thing to do is very difficult for them. And I needed to say that because I think this has been a very, very courageous proponent that's come forward and said, I'm willing to do a compromise, because that part of Como Lake probably should be something other than an RS1 in the size that it is right now. And I think that the idea of waiting and when timing might be a little bit better is good. So I'm having a really hard time with this one, because if I just looked at it, I would say, yes, for sure, we need to do these 6 lots. It's not that different from 4, from doing 2. You could get the RS1s in here. It's not that different from the RS1s. But at the same time, I'm where Councillor Asmundson is like, we have to give some control to our residents. Like, some of our residents just aren't ready to go, and I want to respect that too. So still deciding, but I courage to the developer that came forward, and thank you for this community, really solidarity coming together, and I hope that you continue to be involved with the city of Coquitlam. Thank you.
I'll take a moment to speak now too. I also want to thank all the residents that have been engaged in this process and came out and spoke tonight. I want to also say that I asked at first reading what size the houses could be if we left the lots as they are, the oversized lots, and it would be, I was told, 9,000 square feet. And I'm actually disappointed in tonight in the way that I've been actually speaking to residents in that neighborhood north of Como Lake, And all I heard was everybody hates the monster houses. 3 million. I live in an older part of Coquitlam too, and it's in transition, and there's big lots, and these huge houses go up with 8 bathrooms and all this kind of stuff, and they're $3 million. And people pull over on my street and want to strangle me because of another big, huge house went up. So I'm disappointed tonight that all the people that I've spoken with in the neighborhoods north of Como Lake that say they don't want any more monster houses, they support gentle densification, that none of them came out tonight, or maybe they did, but they didn't come up to speak. So I've actually been told by at least 2 people that signed that initial petition that they signed it way back in the day when it was a different project, and they wouldn't have signed it now. And I've heard one other person in that area say that I should vote this down because it's not dense enough. They want their kids to be able to live in Coquitlam, so we need to go smaller to help address housing affordability. Yes, these homes will not be affordable, but a $3.5 million or $3 million house versus a $1.8 million, it's still not affordable, but it's more affordable. So I'm really struggling with, yes, this is a public hearing, but word on the street for the research I've been doing and the multiple conversations that I've had with people show that they don't want these humongous large houses, which someone alluded to. Once they're built, they're here for 50 or 60 years. And illegal suites go in, and it causes more issues. So tonight, it was gentle densification, 6 houses versus 4, slightly more affordable than the 9,000 square foot ones or 8,000. I also I'm struggling with this. It looks like the public tonight spoke 100% against it, but I have been out there talking to people. I also want to just say, I live on Montgomery Street, and there's a middle school, and not that it's acceptable, and I'm not, but the traffic, yes, those late mothers who can't feed their kids on time and drive. We call it Montgomery Speedway. There's lanes that parallel Austin on the way to Mundy Road Elementary. Yeah, we should do what we can to slow people down and deal with the traffic, but I'm not going to turn down a well-designed, smaller lot subdivision because of parents that speed on the way to school. That doesn't sit well with me. Everything else I had written down here, I think my colleagues have said it already, but I am struggling with this, partly because it looks like the full public tonight isn't supporting it, and that's not what I've heard. So, thank you. Oh, Councillor Wilson?
Council doesn't mind. I just have a procedural question for our staff. 2 questions. One, at this point, and this is a little bit, this particular kind of scenarios in my 3.5 years on council, I can't recall being in this situation, but at this point, could we ask for the maximum house size to be slightly smaller at this point, or would that have had to have been done a lot earlier? More like 4,400 square feet or something, rather than the 100 square feet it was.
55. Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, with the public hearing closed and the bylaws up for consideration, second, third readings, council can do one of 2 or 3 different scenarios. One would be to refer it back to staff with questions arising from matters raised at the public hearing. And staff would then report back on those. And there was some discussion around the maximum dwelling size, and it's certainly covered in the staff report. It's been raised tonight. So if that was to be the decision of council to refer it back to staff to look into that, we could. It's not that we'd be, I don't think, be directed to go back and negotiate numbers. If there was a sense of wanting to look at the maximum, that could be referred back. We have to be careful, though, because you're getting into an area where it's sort of stepping out what's been presented to this point, and we have to be mindful about bringing back new information to council following the public hearing.
Referring it back would be slightly different. Okay, so we could refer it back, or we could, those of us who have concerns about it could vote against it if it got voted against by 4-3. It only needs to, it could come back. The 6-month wait period is only if it's turned back at 4th reading, correct?
If the bylaw is defeated, then there's a 6-month period before that application can be resubmitted and processed again.
Defeated at 3rd reading?
Defeated at any point.
Reading, okay. If we wanted to refer it back, we would just do that by a motion.
A motion to council.
I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that, but there were definitely are concerns about maximum house size, the lot layout. That if we could get some movement on that, maybe it would be a little bit more amenable.
Are you done, Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, when I spoke, that was one of the concerns I did list, was that, the amount of house on there. We talk about, if we're going to have 3 lots, we want them smaller. And I think, from the look of the neighborhood, 3 smaller lots or 3 smaller homes are certainly on that street are certainly better than, even though the lots are smaller, building out to the, to the size. I don't know if that works for the pro forma based on, what they've paid for the lots. So I think there's more information than what we're going to get here. I did have a question, though, and that is, this is unusual. Why are we at 2nd and 3rd and not 2nd, 3rd, and 4th? What would we see at a 4th reading that we don't see? Because this is not a development permit on this, is there?
Yeah, there is a subdivision application that's also being processed in parallel with the rezoning. So I imagine it relates to subdivision matters. Have that in hand.
Okay.
In fact, I think, if you go back to the report from the July 30th report, it actually sets out in there the to-do list of items. Should council support 2nd and 3rd reading, staff recommend we need to have the following items in hand before we would bring it forward for 4th and final reading consideration. Submission of subdivision plan, finalized tree survey, ensure all development services requirements are met, and demolition of the existing dwellings. So there's a number of items that need to be addressed before we brought back for 4th.
Okay. And there's no reason why it has to get 2nd and 3rd tonight at this point if we wanted to get that other information? I'm just looking at the clock, thinking 11:25, and I'm feeling like I'm having to make a decision that I'd quite frankly wish I'd had a little more time to think about, given the number of people who spoke tonight and the points they made.
Again, Madam Chair, if there's concerns at council based on what they've heard tonight at the public hearing that's now closed, you can refer back to staff to address those, try to address those concerns.
Right. Of course, whether we're at 2nd or 3rd or 4th, we still can't receive new information from residents anyway, but we can take time to reflect on what we've heard tonight and get that other information from staff about the potential for house sizes. So I see my colleagues nodding and struggling and thinking that I would prefer to be able to. I don't think in my 6 years on council I've ever asked, can I have a chance to sleep on something? But I'm really feeling that. I'm feeling like I need to sleep. But secondly, I think I'm really feeling like I really maybe want to think this through a little bit further.
Councillor Rasmussen?
Well, thank you very much. I really don't think changing the size from 5,500 to 4,500 would make a difference to what the people came out here and talked to me tonight. People were more about the number of units going in there. Their feeling came out in all their conversations, whether we agree with it or not, was about more cars, more parking on Kelvin, the traffic. So the size of a house, I don't think, would change the public's opinion on it that much. They were talking about this supposed density increase in their area. So if you go from 5,500 to 4,500, I mean, they're having 6,000 to 7,000 square foot houses built in their neighborhood, and they seem to be okay with RS1, which would mean a 6,000 plus square foot house on those lots remaining. And they didn't seem to show any dislike about that. They didn't come up through the public hearing really at all. They just came back to keep it as RS1, keep it as RS1, leave it as it is. So, I mean, if some people need more time to think on this, I'll be willing to defer it. I don't know how much, we're limited in how much information we can receive. We can defer it for people that aren't ready to make a decision tonight. And if that's just the will of some people here, I have no problem with that. But as to the suggestion earlier, changing or asking a negotiation with the developer to reduce the square footage, I don't know if that works in as pro forma or not. And I also don't think the public raised that issue at the public hearing. So, but if it wants to be referred back to staff so people can have more time to think on it, I can support that. I'm ready to vote tonight.
Councillor O'Neill?
Yes, so, I believe when I heard Councillor Wilson first raise this issue, it was just a question. I didn't hear anything about negotiation with the developer, and I think at this stage that'd be quite improper anyway. If it's just simply a question of what size would be allowed, I think we've had that answer already. If somebody is suggesting that we not proceed with this because we want to negotiate with the developer to try to get a smaller size house, I don't think that would be proper at this stage. And I also agree with Councillor Asmundson, even though we're on different sides of this, stated opinion on the bylaw, that would make a difference from what I heard tonight. So I wouldn't. I don't think we need to defer.
Okay. So there's no motion.
There's a main motion is here to give second and third readings to the bylaw. There's no motion to refer or defer.
Councillor Wilson?
Decision on this.
So just to be clear, if it's a deferral, it will appear on the next agenda without any subsequent staff action, and it's not being referred back to staff to follow up on any matter.
Are you talking about a referral or a deferral, Craig?
Yeah. It would be.
Councillor Wilson has the floor.
I'm sorry, I just trying to make a motion that might be supported by Councillor Hodge. Or maybe make.
So is it a motion to defer to October 2nd?
I guess I should have clarified whether I was referring or deferring. So I would like to withdraw that deferral and move a referral to staff.
Okay. So all in favor? Okay. Speaking to the...
A referral to give a bit more time to consider, for us to consider it, and if you let me answer, I'll answer. We had talked about some of the recommendations that the city had made that the developer chose not to proceed with. We had also talked about perhaps lowering the building size, and so if our staff figures that they could talk to the developer about that, while giving us a little bit more time to consider this, I think that'd be great.
Are you done, Councillor?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, help me out here. Call the vote on the deferral. Referral. Okay. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor O'Neill and Zerillo are opposed. So it doesn't pass.
Carries.
I'm sorry, it passes. The referral passes.
So the item's been referred back to staff in order to respond and seek additional clarification on the items raised by council in the debate. And I'm sure Mr. McIntyre and staff will walk the fine line of negotiating items that shouldn't be negotiated. And the item will come back once staff is ready to present. I'd like to go collect Councillor Marsden, and perhaps as I do that, Councillor Zerillo may wish to state her reasons for departing at this time.
I'm going to depart again just because I feel that the marketing that was done over the past year was basically lobbying me, and I'm just going to recuse myself because I don't think I could be impartial to that. So, unfortunate, but it's what happened.
I'm tired.
The next item, item 4, is zoning amendment bylaw number 4789. It pertains to the properties at 218 Blue Mountain Street and 837 Lougheed Highway. Item 4 on the regular council agenda, item 3 on the public hearing agenda. Staff recommendation is that council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4789.
So moved. Second.
Second by Councillor Asmussen. No, the motion. Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Marsden. Sorry, I'm getting tired. All in favor? Oh, Councillor Wilson pushed his button.
If you humor me, please. We did get a long email from a resident who sounded quite passionate about this, and there's all got again lots of concerns about people with views being ruined, safety of children, traffic issues. And again, you know, like we talked about earlier, these things are very important, and we don't take them lightly. I am concerned, though, about the safety issue, and I was wondering if our engineering department would know about the traffic, if there was traffic studies done with this particular proposal, if it looked at the school above rather than just the intersection below, the addition of another 150 cars in the area, potentially other towers down the road.
Through the chair,
Mr. Sue?
there was a traffic impact analysis as part of the development, and their analysis showed there was little impact to the existing local streets. Obviously, there's going to be, more traffic going out at Roderick onto Blue Mountain, but we'll likely have to kind of restrict some of the parking near the intersection to be sure that people can get in and out of Roderick onto Blue Mountain. I just don't know if that traffic impact analysis actually looked as far as the school or not.
I would assume that not a lot of these cars would be driving past the school, so I think that's probably fine. Okay, thank you.
Okay, no more speakers. All in favor? Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Mr. Clerk?
I'll just go collect Councillor Zerillo.
fine.
Next item, item 5 on the agenda, pertains to zoning amendment bylaws number 4773, 4774, and 4775. And the properties, which include a portion of 3512 David Avenue, a portion of 3561 Gistleson Avenue, and portions of 3510 and 3517 Burke Village Promenade. Staff recommendations, the council gives second and third readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaws numbers 4773, 4774, and 4775.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Zerillo?
Thank you. I just wanted to make the point, what are we going, we're going to what? We're going to third reading, right? So I would like to understand if, or I would just like to put it out there that I will be interested when, if this goes all the way to town housing, that I will be interested when development applications come to really understand how they're going to care for their garbage, because we really have a serious wildlife problem, bear problem with garbage. And I'm not saying it's the fault of multifamily at all. What I'm saying is we need to have a very, very good garbage plan if this ends up going into development stage. Those are my comments. Thank you.
No more speakers? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carries unanimously.
Item 6 pertains to City of Coquitlam Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4736 and zoning amendment bylaw number 4737. This pertains to the properties at 1435, 45, and 55 Argyle Street, as well as a series of properties in the 3400 and 3500 block of Highland Drive, as listed before you. Staff recommendations, the council gives second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4736 and City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4737.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Marsden. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, thank you. I originally, when this came at first reading, I had some concerns, particularly around trees and some of the other things on the property. But reading through the report, I think there's a lot of good reasons to support this, and I think it's very well thought out in the report, where it talks about maximizing parking by trying to relocate fire hydrants and intersections between driveways. That's something that we've talked about at great length. It's nice to see that being recognized here. We talk about the mitigating retaining wall usage and heights. I think that's something that's been a topic up on the mountain. Some environmental things here, such as daylighting 213 feet of West Smiling Creek, replacing existing culverts that were put in at a time that we didn't recognize the impact that they have on our fish. So I think that's all good stuff. And I was really interested about the tree that was I guess it's a maple tree in the corner. And this is, I think, if I read this correctly, maybe I should have asked this during the public hearing part, so I don't think this is new information, but it says well, certainly I like the part about the tree retention, the commemorative plaque. I think that's kind of neat. I don't know if we've done that. Certainly I don't recall that in my time on council. But it says the appropriate restrictive covenants for the reduced building envelope and tree retention would be registered. So am I to read from this that there's actually going to be a covenant, or that tree will become a registered tree?
Yes, through the chair. There will be a restrictive covenant registered on that resulting lot that the Katsura tree is located on. This would then ensure that future houses won't affect the critical root zone of the tree, so it can be safely retained.
We're going to all this work to work around with the building envelope to save the tree. I wouldn't want it to fall victim to somebody in 10 years who says, "Oh, I'm allowed to cut 2 trees a year," and down it goes. So there's an actual covenant, which I think is unusual. We haven't done that, but I think it's amazing. I'm really happy that we've done that. So I think there's a lot of good things in here about creating housing, protecting the environment, which is a topic certainly up on the mountain. And so I look at this and I think and the work to actually put have this number of lots together was a lot of work that went into this and a lot of thought. And so I thank the developer for the work. It's a lot of lots. And I thank the developer a lot because I think there's a lot of work went into this, and I like it, and I'm going to support it. And so, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Councillor Zerillo opposed. Carries.
Item 7 is a report of staff, and it pertains to the Potential Economic Development Reserve Fund projects. Staff recommendations that Council approve the allocation of the Economic Development Reserve Fund request outlined below for the following projects and initiatives. $30,000 for the purchase, programming, development, and installation of 4 digital tourism kiosks. $25,000 for Phase 2 of the development of Coquitlam business statistics and data. And $25,000 for the development of a technology strategy, which will become Phase 3 of the Economic Development Strategy update process.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Reid. Councillor Zerillo?
Yeah, I just had some questions and comments about the item 3, which was the technology strategy. We have had, it says in the report, there was a workshop, a technology workshop that happened in 2015, and my questions are just around choosing technology over the other sectors or other channels that are available to us. So my first question through the chair to staff, and I'm not sure, there he is, awesome. Was the Chamber of Commerce involved in identifying which sector it would make sense to do a strategy around?
Mr. Monroe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, the Chamber was involved with the technology workshop, and I've had discussions with their CEO about various sectors, but technology would definitely be one of them.
Okay. So I guess I'm wondering if the other areas were explored. Like I'm actually on the Stats Canada Employment by Major Industry Group for BC, and I take the point that the increase in technology is definitely real, but I also see there's a lot of other sectors that are growing significantly, like agriculture, manufacturing, healthcare, and even finance, insurance, real estate. Is there additional data about those areas as well, or kind of why are we focused on technology specifically?
Through the Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the reasons why we focused on technology is obviously the growth of the sector within British Columbia, and the fact that we're developing we're getting to be known in North America as a bit of a technology hub as well. Obviously not to the level of Silicon Valley. But I would say the other thing that we have to consider is the fact that no matter what sector is involved, there's technology jobs related in public administration. It could be in mining, resources, etc. I just went to a event the other day where it was a software company, local software company that was doing stuff for a resource company. So I think if we look at technology, it probably encompasses and impacts the majority of those sectors that are mentioned in the in NAICS codes or on Industry Canada.
And thank you for that, because that's kind of the way of the industry right now, is they're saying that technology is infiltrating every single sector. It's almost not standing alone. So I guess that's why I'm wondering why we would choose technology instead of even just an office strategy or agriculture or health and wellness, natural foods. We know we have a hub. Like, I'm just wondering about that, is that if we focus on the technology piece, are we excluding technology that's happening in manufacture, technology that's happening in healthcare? Like, is this really the right sector, I guess? And where's the data that says this is the right sector? Like, I'm looking at the jobs through Stats Canada, I'm looking at the channels, I'm looking at the growth, and there's lots of sectors that are growing.
I'll defer to the boss man.
Mr. Dumont?
I'm not sure that I can help too much with this one, but further to what David said, I think what studies show is technology and focusing it on technology can add more to the economy than focusing on a single industry. And the reason for that, as David said, is technology cuts across all the various industries. So when we're looking at technology and a technology strategy, we are looking at technology as it applies to various industries such as office sector, etc. And what the literature says is that overall technology will bring more to the looking at technology will bring more to the economy than looking at a single industry such as agriculture.
So I like that answer, and that's good. And it reminds me, because I've got a note here about female-dominated industries and male-dominated industries, and there's a bunch of literature out there too that if we invest in women and if we invest in industries where women can expand their reach, we also have the ability to add a lot to the economy. So we've chosen this one. There's many. We've chosen this one. And I like your answer, Mr. Dumas, around we're going to look at it as it passes all kinds of channels. So I would like to see that when the strategy comes, is that we're definitely incorporating the business that we have in Coquitlam, that manufacturing section that we have, the healthcare section that we have. I don't want to be exclusively focused on technology because we're too late. We're too late to the game. I mean, that's way ahead. Vancouver's already blowing us away on that. POCO has this through private business. They have businesses that are out working with Microsoft. Port Moody had one that left, but they have a bunch more. So I think for us to try to catch up now, it's not necessarily the greatest thing, but I think if we look at the sectors that we're strong at and we look at technology, that makes sense to me. But I mean, I'm always here advocating for women and girls, and I think that the technology sector is very heavily weighted to males at this point in time. We're trying to push more women, but I mean, I guess I find that it's unfortunate that this is the one we've chosen when there's Douglas College is running nursing programs and health programs and stuff like that, and this is the one we choose.
Through the chair.
Seeing no other speakers? Oh, sorry, Mr. Monroe, do you want to?
Sorry, just thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple points of clarification. Just a reminder that all the sectors are involved in our business attraction programs and business retention and expansion programs, so we'll be all working with them. And a bit of a background, or one of the reasons I took this job 6 years ago was the fact that when I was doing the research, there was a lot of home-based businesses with a technology twist. So in my opinion, if you look at job growth potential for the city of Coquitlam, putting in infrastructure and resources that can take those home-based businesses into some of the office space that might be developing in our core areas is definitely worthwhile doing. And if we didn't have those kind of tidbits of information, then maybe we would have selected a different sector.
Office strategy, but we've decided to do this one, so let's make it as wide as we can. And my last question, sorry, would be, are we getting a consultant? Is it going to RFP? How is this working?
Through the chair, yes, we'll be going through a process to get a consultant to help us develop this strategy.
Good. Thank you.
Seeing no other speakers? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously.
Madam Chair, that's the last formal item on this agenda.
No?
That was before the vote.
Councillor Asenson moved adjournment. Anybody second? Second by May Reid. All in favor? We are adjourned. But I have to open the floor up for questions.